This is David Lichtenstein from the Yeshiva Shalmala. It's Shavuos time. We're going to be speaking about Yissachar and Zevulun. Interesting shilas. Can a wife be Zevulun? Did your wife support you while you were maybe in Kol, like mine did? Well, is that Yissachar and Zevulun? Does it need to be written down in a shtar? Is a handshake good enough, or just an agreement? Can you use the money you are putting forward if you are the Zevulun for Tzedaka, or is it a separate agreement? We'll be speaking about these and many more with our wonderful guest host, Rabbi Pfeffer. He's a Dayan, a Paisik, an attorney. He was on the Bezdin of Rabbi Weiss for many years. He will be interviewing Rabbi Zev Leff of Moshav Matisyahu. He will also be interviewing Turx, the first religious White House reporter. Sinai, the Gemara says, Misham Yorda Sin Alaylam, about the state of anti-Semitism in America today. Is it rising? Should you be concerned? Last weeks, we had a ton of responses. We had hundreds of calls and emails. We try to respond to as many as we can. I do have a day job. But I would say one thing. Many of the calls we get are from anonymous callers. In other words, they hide their numbers, etc. We just discard these. We don't listen to them. We clearly don't respond to them. And the logic being is, if you don't have enough conviction to put your name on something, it's not worth my time. It's not worth my engineer's time. It's just not worth our time. Anonymous writers are pashkevilim. It just goes in the garbage. So save yourself the energy. If you want to be anonymous, it's wonderful. But please, we won't respond to you. I would like to mention something that happened this week. There was last week, or 2 weeks ago, there was a big anti-vax rally in Muncie. It was in the atrium. And it upset me very much. Like the anti-vaxxers, it got such worldwide attention. It caused so much damage to Klal Yisrael. Somebody told me they went into a taxi, and the taxi driver stopped and said, "Do you vaccinate?" And didn't want to start the car until he said yes. I mean, I got letters from Rabbanim all over the world, what it does to Friar people, what it does to themselves, humiliates. Why would the atrium be party to this? I wish they would come on and respond to us. Maybe somebody from the atrium could come respond. This week, a Teres Chinka hosted an anti-vaxxer rally. They set up 1,300 chairs. Only 50 people came. But my question would be we have so many incredible guests here. We have shluchim who go to the most remote parts of the world in a Ma'aseh Nefesh. We had on relief people who give kidneys to other people. We have people here, Balei Chesadim from Aleph, they'll give their beds to another Yid. And yet you have businesses like Chinka. You just wonder that for a few dollars, they'll sell Jews down the river. Could somebody from Ateres Chinka come on and explain this? And I just ask you, my wonderful listeners, aren't there so many places to make simchas in Borough Park, Flatbush? Don't we have to wonder when somebody hosts a matziv of Sinas Yisrael, a redifa of every Yid, of every frum and non-frum Jew? Aren't there maybe better places? I wish somebody from Ateres Chinka would come on and explain that. Before we go to Rabbi Pfeffer, I would like to say something, not a vart on Shavuos. Shavuos is very meaningful to me. This is the Yeshiva Shalmala. He's going to be talking about Yissachar and Zevulun. Let me give you a different twist on it. Smach Zevulun b'tzeisecha, v'Yissachar b'yalecha, birchas Moshe. Rejoice, Zevulun b'tzeisecha, v'Yissachar. I have a question. Every other Shevet got their own bracha. Yissachar got his own bracha. But here in middle of Zvulun's bracha, what happens? Yissachar comes barging in. Smach Zevulun b'tzeisecha, v'Yissachar b'yalecha. So the Chidushei Rim in the Imrei Harim says something really nice. He says, no, that's not the pshat. Smach Zevulun, it's talking to Zevulun. Zevulun, rejoice b'tzeisecha, and remember, Zevulun, that the Yissachar b'yalecha, you should act as Yissachar b'yalecha. You could be out in the world all day, flying, dealing, writing, litigating, earning, but when you come home, Yissachar b'yalecha, take out a Gemara Baba Kama. So it's the fusion of two worlds. And it's interesting, where else do you see it? When Zevulun is born, What does it say? Hapam Yizbeleini Ishi. So Rashi says, she said, Yaakov moved in full time into Leah's abode. Yizbeleini Ishi, Miloshin Beis Vul. Now it's interesting. Yaakov is always neged Torah. Yaakov is the Ishtam Yoshev Halim. He's Mesamel V'Amud HaTorah Titin Emes LiYaakov, and he moves into Leah's abode when she gives birth to the merchant, to the banker, to the investment banker, the real Zevulun. It seems very paradoxical. Let me suggest an answer. Isn't Torah given to Klal Yisrael? What does it say? Moshe went up to heaven. The Gemara in Shabbos and Daf Peches says, and the Malachim said, why are you giving a human the Torah, the holy Torah? So Moshe, Rabbi Shalom said, Moshe, answer them. So he said, Rabbi Shalom, what did he say? It says, what does it say in the Torah? Do any of you have an issue with Avodah Zarah? Do you have this Yissachar? Do you live in this world? It says, Zachar Hashem Shabbos L'Kadshay. Do you do work that you should have to rest? It says, Leisisa. He asked, is there matin? Do you do business? So what did Moshe say? Give me the Torah, because I can make the Torah real. I could fuse it to the world. So what is Kabbalah Torah about? Moshe teaches the fusion of two worlds. The world we live in, the world of Zevulun, and the world of Yissachar. And really, what do we eat? There's only one mincha that comes from chametz, right? What is that? Atzeres. What is matzah? Is pure flour, water, no salt, no yeast. Chametz, it's a fusion. It has in it delicious things. It has yeast, sourdough, etc. It blows up. It's the fusion of two worlds. When we have the Torah, we can eat chametz. Because all Kabbalah Torah, what is the shtei lechem? The lechem ruchnius, the lechem of gashmius. And what is the story of Rus? It says in Rus, Vatera ki misametzes hi laleches. She wanted to go. So what does Rashi say? Misametzes hi lechem. She brings the Gemara in Yuvamas on Mem Zayin. It says laleches. He says she was trying to go. She says, I want to tell you about Tchum Shabbos. Basher telchi elech. What does it mean, Basher? When you read it, it sounds so romantic. Basher telchi elech. Basher talini olin. Alekayech aleki. Basher tamusi amos. And Rashi says, no, it's not talking about going, traveling, etc. Kasher telchi elech Tchum Shabbos. Talini olin. Issa yichud. Amcha ami avodas kechavim alekayach aleki arba mises bezeh. She's talking dvarim gashmiim, and Rashi says no. It's really all about spirituality. The message of Rus, the message of Shavuos, the message of Yissachar Zevulun is really about fusing two separate worlds. And I'll tell you something else. The Gemara in Eruvin says, Rabbi Yochanan says, if Torah wasn't given, we would learn sneas from a cat, gezel from an ant, arayas, mayoyin, etc. Torah is telling us something very deep here. Do you often feel, and many times I do, that we live in this world, and superimposed on this world are all these dinim and dinim and dinim, rules and rules and rules, just like a cloak put on this world, maybe to make us unhappy, to make life difficult? The Gemara says a whole different look at it. What does Rabbi Yochanan say? He says, if you look in the Torah, you would find the reality of the creation. What does it say? There's an Issa Gezel. The ants act that way. The Torah is a revelation of what this world is, of reality. It's in harmony with reality. It synchronizes with reality. It's not a cloak on reality. Do you know, the Medrash says that in this world, when we do things on Shabbos we don't understand, you pick a date, you pick a thing. It says, Amar Reb Shimon b'Shem Reb Shimon Chasida. What's going to happen in the next world? He says, when you pick a te'ena, the Dayan is going to scream, "It's Shabbos! It's Shabbos!" Shabbos is reality. The world rests on Shabbos. The Torah, when we learn the halacha, it's megala something in reality that maybe we don't see. There are people who do see it. Torah is not superimposed on reality. It's a harmony. When we daven mincha, when we daven shachris, we open up the windows to let the sun in. When we daven mincha, we push the sun away, we send it home. And when we daven ma'ariv, we open up our arms to the great darkness. It synchronizes with reality. It's not superimposed. Here's a wonderful story about how one tzaddik could see how Shabbos came into this world. B'chush.
You know, very few rabbis had the privilege of being called holy, as much as they were very holy. But to be called holy by the other tzaddikim is very special. There was one Rebbe, the Heilige Rishner. Our hearts shiver when we just mention his holy name. He was a descendant of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he was really a descendant of King David. In a certain deep way, he restored a little bit the kingdom of God, the kingdom of King David. You know, there were rabbis who were teachers, and then there were rabbis who were kings. Rishon was a king. Okay, today, thank God, we have a 747 and a Concorde. But this is about 180 years ago. The Heilige Tzemach Tzedek, the president of Lubavitcher Rebbe's great-great-grandfather, wanted so much to be in Rishon, because I want you to know, all the tzaddikim, all the holy Rebbes went to the Holy Rishner, but somehow he was already old and he couldn't do it. So he said to one of his biggest chassidim, Rabbi Isaac Homler, the Heilige Rabbi Isaac Homler, please make your way to Rishon. Rishon is near Kiev, is in the Ukraine, and Lubavitch is in White Russia, and be there for one Shabbos and tell me what's happening. And everybody knows there were certain times when nobody was permitted to be in the Rishner's room together with him. And one of those special times was a few minutes before Shabbos. But the Heilige Rishner was told that the Tzemach Tzedek sent a special young man to be with him. So he sent word to him, come to be with me 10 minutes before Lichtmenschen, 10 minutes before Shabbos. You can imagine Rabbi Isaac Homler prepared himself, and he was certain 10 minutes before Shabbos he'll walk into the Rishner's room. The Rishner is sitting with his shtreimel, and most probably he is going over the parsha of the week, preparing himself for Shabbos. But it wasn't so. He's ushered in to the holy room of the Holy Rishner, and here the Rishner is smoking a pipe. And the whole room is filled with smoke. How much the Rishner is smoking out the world. The Rishner is filling the whole world with the incense of the high priest. And it's getting later. Rabbi Isaac Homler is sitting there in silence, shivering inside. But he said, oh, it's getting later for Shabbos, only 2 minutes before Shabbos. And the Rishner is still smoking his pipe. Exactly the time of Lichtmenschen, to the split second, the Rishner put out the pipe and says to him, Russischer Gorn, Russischer great rabbi, come with me to the window. I'd like to show you something. And you and I, closing our eyes and going with him, Gewalt. Wish one time in my life I could take my children to that window. Listen to me. The Heilige Rishner looked out from the window and he says to him, young man, do you see? Can you see the clouds of Shabbos? Can you see the clouds of Shabbos? Can you see the clouds of the weekdays? making place for the clouds of Shabbos. Can you see the sky of the 6 days of the week, making place for the sky of Shabbos? Can you feel the wind? Can you feel the wind of the 6th day of the week, making place for the wind of Shabbos? Can you see, can you see, can you see the whole world, the whole world, the whole world, the world of the 6th day of the week, making place for the world of Shabbos? Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Lechodaydi likras kalo, b'nei Shabbos nikablo.
And you know, in Sheshek, they bring that, they say over that, the Sfasemis recounts, he says when he went to the Kutzka for the first time, the Mishamish of the Kutzka, Reb Feivel, was screaming. He said, we have to lock things up because people come and they steal things. There was Hefkeris. He says the Kutzka Rebbe overheard him and he said, they steal things? And he gave a shtar. He says, how could they steal? It says Loi Sigzil. It was a reality to him. And that's Pshat of the Gemara. The Gemara says in Psachim and Asamaches, Hakol Moedim, even though many other Yom Tovim, Pesach, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, there's no Lochem, everybody's Maida that on Shavuos of all days, yes, you should rejoice and feast and eat. Shavuos, day of Kabbalah, a day of feasting and eating of Lochem. And the answer is yes. What's the Torah about? The Torah is about fusing two worlds. Smach Zevulun b'tzeisecha v'Yissachar b'yalecha. If you can bring them together. So here's my question. I'm a working person. And I get this question pretty often. You know, work is pretty aggravating. It's a very competitive world out there. How? We know that it's supposed to be v'Yissachar b'yalecha. How do we create Yisachar b'yalecha? You've just come home, you've traveled, you've had all kinds of issues that work has, the everyday of work, and you want to sit down and open up your Masechtas Baba Kama, Masechtas Shat, whatever it may be. How do you do it? What are the tools you need? So let me suggest a few tools that I was Mechaber for my Rebbes. I try to use them. Maybe I could share them with you. And there's one tool. It's called compartmentalizing. And I heard this over. There's a concept of terasei umnasei. What is terasei umnasei? Terasei umnasei is somebody, his whole life is only Torah. The Gemara in Shabbos says, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was terasei umnasei. So one of the, I don't remember where I saw this, but one of the great Chassidish Seforim says, every person has the option also of being terasei umnasei. What does that mean? While you're learning, elect that you should be terasei umnasei. If it's an hour a day, a half an hour, whatever it is, for that hour I am terasei umnasei. I heard over from my father, Yissachar Zevulun, there was a Yid called Reb Shamala Astrapala. There's a lot of legends about him. So they said he came to this city and he was very, those days they would go to Shul Shabbos, hope somebody invited him. So he asked, where should I get invited to? He said, the Rosh Hakol, his wife is a wonderful cook, but don't go there for Shabbos. He outwits everybody. He doesn't like to be machtas her, so what does he do? His wife brings the food. She puts it on the platter in the middle. The balabas then turns around and asks you a question. While you're answering the question, the guest is answering the question, he eats up all the food. So he said, nobody ever gets fed over there. Ham Shul said, no problem, I'm going to try it. So he goes there. He sits down, they wash. Wife brings out a plate of fish. Balabas turns to him. He says, which city are you from? He says, I'm from Ostra. He said, Ostra, how's the Rosh HaKol Reb Zalman? And he starts reaching for the fish. So Reb Shalom Ostropolis says, he died. You didn't hear? So this guy said, he died. I can't believe it. I just did a whole masumatin with him. He turns to his wife while he's talking. Reb Shalom Ostropolis finishes the whole bowl of fish. Balabas turns around. Okay, he didn't have fish. The wife brings in the next course, farfel, tzimis. And he starts reaching. He says, and how's the Rav of the city, Reb Berla? He said, Reb Berla? You didn't hear that he also died? He said, what are you talking about? Reb Berla died. He used to be with me in yeshiva. It was such a masman. Reb Shalom Ostropolis cleans out the tzimis, the farfel. Okay, they bring in the chicken. He has one last thing. And how is the famous mayor who everybody thought was going to run for, the guy, Jerome? He says, you didn't hear about his amazing death? He said, I can't believe it. I don't. Meanwhile, he eats up the chicken. Finally, he says, everybody died? He said to him, wenn ich ess, ist die ganze Welt gestorben. When I eat, the whole world is dead. There's a word for Reb Chaim Stutchener. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, he writes in the Sichas Musa, he says, on Shabbos, there's an Isser of Seiser to break, to destroy. But it only destroys the makalkal. The only time you chayiv, if it's almanas livnais, if you're going to use it to build, then it's a masakein. But it has to be livnais b'mkaimei. So the Gemara, yes, you learn it from the Mishkan. The Mishkan always traveled, it was never b'mkaimei. So the Gemara says, since it was al pi Hashem, it's always k'makaimei. If you're traveling with the word of God, you're always b'makaimei. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said it. He said it's like a child. If you ask a child in its mother's arm, where are you? Does he say I'm in Manhattan? Does he say I'm in Italy? He says I'm in my mother's arm. He says wherever, since it's al pi Hashem, it's always b'makaimei. And I think that there's a message to that to our lives too. Very often something happens. We have a terrible day at work. And we say, just what a waste. How aggravating. And you come home and you can't take your mind off it. You can't eat supper. You can't open a Gemara. But you know what? If everything we do is we are on a mission, al pi Hashem yachnu, al pi Hashem yiso, we earn to be able to support our children, to give tzedaka, to contribute to the world. It's all al pi Hashem yachnu. So you know what? All that happened, even the stira, it's the k'makaimei dummy. It's all part of our mission. It's like Yosef said to his brothers. He says, "You atem chashaftem aloi l'ra," but you know what? L'michya shlachani alechem. The Rebbeinu Shalom had other ideas. I was following the Rebbeinu Shalom's orders. I never lost my smile. It was always al pi Hashem yachnu. So all that grief to somebody who is a maimin, it's al pi Hashem yachnu. It shouldn't really hurt us. I think another important point when we come home, and that day maybe we can't learn, is to learn self-forgiveness. Even Yaakov Avinu, who was Torah, what does it say? He learned for 14 years by the house of Shem ve'Ever. And yet the same Yaakov Avinu, what does he tell Lavan? Zeli esrim shana b'veisecha. For 20 years, right? Treifalei hevesi alecha. Genuv siyoim. He says, Hayisi bayoim achalani chayre, v'kerach balayla. Vatidad shnasi me'enai. For 20 years I took care of your sheep. I froze at night. I shivered at night. I was exhausted. It doesn't sound like those years necessarily. He did a lot of learning. So I think another point is we can be self-forgiving. There are going to be days that it is going to be hard. Here's another thing that you can do. If it's been a hard day, you want to learn and you say, how could I learn? It was so difficult. I encountered so many dogs, barking dogs, so many jerks. There was a study done, that addicts who developed terminal illnesses often leave their addiction, a heroin addict, etc. Why is that? They weren't able to survive life. Life was too painful. They needed drugs. But suddenly, when they realized they only have 3 months left, the realization that life is beautiful, hits them in the eye so strongly, that they don't need, the beauty of life grasps them. They don't need the drugs that they needed the rest of their life. They fall away. The beauty of it. I think part of it is, it's true there's a lot of aggravation. Zvulun b'tzeisecha. But on the other hand, the Torah is so beautiful. Do you know the Gemara says there was a man, the Yamar, the Gemara in Chagig and Dafei says, Rav Idi Yavuad Rav Yaakov Beridi, he used to travel for 6 months to learn one day in yeshiva. Imagine 3 months each way to learn for one day. So beautiful and precious was one daf of Gemara by him. So I think sometimes there's so much aggravation, but recognize there's so much, that one daf, that one vart, that one pasuk chumash is so beautiful that we can be Yisschar by halacha. So I hope I've shared with you some of the tools, I'm mostly speaking to myself, that I use after a long day. Let's go to our wonderful host.
So to discuss the issue of the special Yissachar and Zevulun partnership, those who learn Torah with those who support Torah, we have on the line, we're honored to have on the line Rabbi Zev Leff. Rabbi Leff is a rabbi, an educator, an author, a renowned speaker who used to be the Rav in Miami, Greater Miami, Florida, and today he's a Marada Asra for many years of Moshav Matisyahu. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today, Rabbi Leff. Thank you very much for dedicating your precious time for this.
Thank you.
And so maybe just to begin with clarifying the concept, what is actually special about the Yissachar Zevulun partnership? I mean, we know that a person can give money to Tzedaka, a person can give money to a Talmid Chacham to support him in enabling him to stay in learning for more time and to learn Torah without having the burden of Parnasa on his shoulders. But what is actually unique or special about the concept of Yissachar and Zevulun? The pasuk says, Yismach Zevulun b'tzeisecha, Yissochar b'olecha, and Rashi explains this is a special partnership. Can you please explain what is actually special here?
Okay, there are various approaches and perspectives on how this works. Amongst them, that, as you said, it's a partnership. And according to that, one has to make up a condition to begin with, that the one who is learning is being supported by the one who is doing the supporting, and in that way they share the reward of the Torah learning. According to that, the person who is learning diminishes his reward. In fact, the Vilna Gaon says that he shouldn't give up all his reward, that he should keep at least 6 hours of learning for himself. But many others hold that it's not a partnership per se, but the Ribono Shel Olam is concerned that there be as much Torah in the world as possible. Since the Torah is the life force of all the worlds, if it wouldn't be for the Torah, the world couldn't exist. So the Ribono Shel Olam is concerned that there be that life force, that energy source, as much as possible in the world. And someone who, for various reasons, either because he's not capable of devoting himself totally to learning Torah and increasing the Torah in the world in that way, or because he is very busy with business deals or whatever, and just doesn't have the time to devote to Torah properly, or he feels that he's better at business and somebody else learning Torah would be much more successful. Under those circumstances, he is capable of increasing the Torah in the world by supporting other people learning, which would be superior to his personal learning. And in that way, the Ribono Shel Olam gives him reward for increasing Torah in the world, just as if he would be sitting and learning, to the point where his reward, since it comes directly from the Ribono Shel Olam, as if he's learning Torah, since he is causing Torah to be increased in the world, not only does he get reward for it in the next world, but he'll know the Torah that the other one learns, and the milas of Torah, fact that the Torah helps a person control his Yissochar and so on, will accrue to him also. So it's not necessarily a partnership, but the person who is supporting Torah in this world is increasing the Torah in the world, and that in itself is like learning Torah. However, even the person who supports Torah, chiyuv to learn Torah. So he has
meaning
to...
The Zevulun himself needs to still be kaveh etim, or he needs to still set aside a specific time for his own limiter. So even though you said that he does get the milos, he gets all of the effects or the advantages of limiter through his partnership, nonetheless he still has to do his own learning.
Right. He's exempt from learning as much as it's impossible for him to devote himself totally, and that he fulfills by supporting others. But as it says, everybody, the Rambam says, is chayiv to learn Torah, whether he's poor or rich or sick or well, and that applies also to this person who's very rich and busy with his business and supporting others. He also has to find time when he's not so busy and impossible to devote himself to Torah, to be koveit in Torah.
Right. So I know there's a famous approach of Rav Moshe, who really speaks about this kind of partnership model where it's like 50-50. The Zvulun gives half of his money to Yissachar, and Yissochar gives half of his shtar to the Zvulun. Based on this, you would actually, this is a real contractual arrangement, meaning we're making a contract, and it's as if the Zvulun is, as it were, buying a stake in the limiter and receiving the shtar of that limiter. Is it possible to make a contract, this type of contract? I mean, it's a choshen mishpatik, a contract?
Okay, there's a difference of opinion amongst the poskim and shonim achronim whether a person can sell the reward of his mitzvahs or the reward of his Torah learning. There are definitely opinions that say that that's how it works, and it's a choshen mishpat contract that just like I can sell you an item, I can sell you my reward for a mitzvah or for my Torah learning. But many disagree and say that reward for a mitzvah is not something that's a commodity that can be sold. It's not something that's tangible. Right. It's not something that a person has the right to transfer to somebody else.
I think Rav Haigain also, Rabbi Kiva I think mentioned Rav Haigain that says, it's impossible to transfer shtar, and then the idea is that it's automatic. It doesn't require a contract, or
it doesn't require a contract. But the Netziv says that without a contract, it works in a way that you're helping somebody do something. It's more like Tzedaka. With a contract, it becomes more like a partnership. But the partnership isn't that I'm selling you the reward for my Torah learning, but the idea is that since the person who is supporting is enabling the person to be able to learn with a free head, and therefore his learning is not only quantitatively better, but qualitatively better. So the person is a messiah. He's a person who's a causative factor of someone else learning Torah and someone else getting reward. So he deserves not to share that reward. He doesn't, according to this, diminish from the reward of the person who's learning, but since he caused it, he is a partner in that learning automatically. If you mention it and that's your intention, then you're a bigger partner. If you don't mention it and you automatically have made that, have caused that, but without the intention, you're lesser of a cause because your intention is not there. Right.
Right. So you would say that
I do something, so it can work for the negative, it can work for the positive. If I cause you to do an aveira, so I get punished because I'm I'm a causative factor for that Aveira. If I cause you to do a mitzvah, then I'm a causative factor for that mitzvah. So I get rewarded by the Rabbanan for making that cause.
Right. So Rabbi Leff, I mean, there are institutions or kolelim that offer a Yissachar Zevulun arrangement with a given avreich or with a given, somebody who's dedicating his day to a study who might otherwise not be able to. You would say that it's actually it's recommended, meaning it's something which is more set in stone. It's something more concrete to actually make a proper contractual partnership. Now, whether we consider it to be a real choshen mishpat kind of contract or whether we don't, it does make it more actualized, it makes it more concrete, and this would be recommended rather than just giving a general contribution.
It increases the intention of both sides to the person who's supporting realizes the weight of what he's doing, right? And the one who's learning realizes the responsibility he has to carry out what he's being supported to do. There's even a shayla.
Right.
Let's say the person who's being supported doesn't learn so well, or he wastes some of his time. Right? If it's a partnership, so if two partners are partners in a business, and one of them is supposed to take care of the business properly and doesn't, they both lose. But if it's not a partnership, but it's an idea that I gave you the ability to be able to learn. You didn't take that ability, but that doesn't detract from my giving you the potential. Then it could be that the person who's supporting will get more reward than the person who's actually learning and not living up to his potential.
Right. And from the perspective of the Yisachar, meaning the person who's doing the learning, I mean, this is just coming to mind while we're speaking. Do you think that this would also the kind of arrangement of Yissachar and Zevulun, would that also get him out of being in the category of the Rambam, let's say, somebody who is being supported by Tzedaka while learning Torah? Because this isn't really Tzedaka. This is something where he's really performing a service, as it were, which somebody is buying into. Somebody is investing in him. It's a real investment. He's producing something which is worthwhile for somebody to invest in, meaning he's not someone that's just being supported.
Right.
He's actually has a real partnership with somebody.
Right. Well, in that Rambam, I always like to say, because the Rambam in the end of Hilchos Shmita and Yovel says that a person who wants to dedicate himself totally to Torah and not earn a living on his own becomes like Shevet Levi, and the Rebbeinu Shalom provides for him like he does for Shevet Levi, means that he sees to it that other Jews support him like they do the Leviim. And there the Rambam says that he's Kodesh Kadoshim. And yet the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah says that person is Mechal Shem Shamayim, and since he is using the Torah as a means to earn a living. I always like to explain, based on a Svarno in Pirkei Avos, that it really depends on a person's intention. If a person says, I got to earn a living, I could be a plumber, but I don't like water. I could be a doctor, but I can't stand the sight of blood. But I enjoy learning Torah, so I'll use Torah as a means of earning a living, and I'll find somebody to support me, and the Torah will become my profession, my means of earning a living. That's what the Rambam says is Mechal Shem Shamayim. Right, you're using the Torah as a means to earn a living. But somebody who says, look, I have the potential to devote myself to Torah, to Klal Yisrael, and I would like to do that exclusively. But if I do it for more than 3 days, I'll starve to death. So I'm forced to be able to make some kind of agreement with someone who wants to be able to proliferate Torah in the world through me, and I will be able to be supported by him in order to devote myself to Torah. That kind of person is Kodesh Kadoshim. So a person who knows in the beginning that he's being supported in order to be able to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem of proliferating Torah in the world, that person is Kodesh Kadoshim. A person who does this with the main intention of earning a living through learning Torah is, according to the Rambam, not doing what's proper.
Right, but and the investment model of the Yissachar Zevulun also certainly buys into that model or justifies that model, because the Torah scholar is doing a service for the Zevulun. The Zevulun is looking for somebody. He's not able to learn the whole day, so he wants somebody to be able to to share in that endeavor, whether he's sharing in the shtar or buying the shtar. That's the question that we spoke about before. But in any case, it's a real investment. It's what about the Seder? There's a in the Psukim it says, right, Yismach Zevulun b'Yisachar v'Yisachar b'Yolecha. It puts Zevulun first. Is there an order of preference, or this is just two different aspects, but they're both they're both equal in that sense, or the Yisachar gets preference because he's the one that's actually learning the Torah?
Right. Well, the Seforim say that Zevulun is put first because he does have that preferred for a few reasons. One is that without him, the other person couldn't possibly learn. So he, like we said, is the causative. The cause comes before the result. In addition to that, like we said, it's possible that the Zevulun will even get more reward than the person learning if the person learning is not fulfilling his potential, but the Zevulun gave him the ability to fulfill that potential. He'll get the reward as if the person was fulfilling his potential, where the person who's learning will only get the reward of what he actually did. And in addition to that, the Zevulun has the benefit of being able to support Torah and not have to have the all HaTorah per se upon him that detract a little bit from his Simchas HaChaim sometimes. Even though Rav Aaron Kotler once said that somebody who would go and support Torah may have a greater share in the world to come, but what's with his world, this world, right? A person who's not...
Right? He has Olam Hazeh. What about his Olam, right?
Right, his Olam Hazeh affected, not his Olam Haba so much.
Right, but you have to be Rav Aaron to really say that with a full with a full spirit, with a full conviction. Somebody who's living and experiencing the Torah. Have you found this? Obviously you have many years of experience, and I'm sure both from the Zevulun side and from the Yissachar side, of course. Have you seen the special siyata d'shmaya of the Zevulun? Because part of the even though of course the Zevulun arrangement, Rashi mentions or other Mafarshim mentioned the Olam Haba aspect of receiving the shtar, but a lot of Zevuluns that I know are also hopeful, at the very least, that the arrangement with the Yissachar will also give them siyata d'shmaya in Olam Hazeh, meaning will also, because they have a stake, because their business has a stake in the Talmud Torah of the Yissachar, so Memele they'll also have the special siyata d'shmaya to be able to prosper, to continue, to be able to support more Torah in the world. Just out of interest from somebody who has many years of experience, have you seen this play out in reality?
Yes, definitely. One person comes to mind, obviously without mentioning any names, that I knew when I was learning in Telz, and he was a Talmud also, and he was like the person least likely to succeed. He never understood the shiur, and his ability to concentrate was very, very poor. And he went on to become a very successful businessman. And he took seriously the fact that the Ribono Shel Olam gave him such success, so he should be able to support Torah. And he had such Simchas HaChaim with supporting Torah in a very significant way. Not only that, but he was sure that his success was only measured by how much Torah he supported. And he took it so seriously. You can see on him the Amal HaTorah, in how he supported Torah in a way that was mamish like a person who put in Amal in his learning. This person put Amal in his support. And he attributed a lot of his success in business to the the fact that he was supporting Torah, and he enjoyed and went tremendous simchas hachayim. And that type of person, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave him a tafkid to be able to, like Reb Chaim Brisker says, to proliferate Torah in the world, not necessarily through his own Torah, but through the Torah that he supported and that he caused to be in this world.
Very nice, amazing. Would you say, would it be possible to extend the Yissachar Zevulun model? I mean, is this an accurate thing? Some people speak about, for example, in Eretz Yisrael, where there's a very common model in Eretz Yisrael of women going to work in order to allow their husbands to stay in learning more. Other people could speak about doing all kind of chores and saving people from having to leave the Beis Medrash because I'm taking care of whatever it is, a certain chore, a bank account, something that they have to do. The Yissachar Zevulun idea can be extended to other areas, to other spheres, or really it's specific to the monetary investment?
No, just the opposite. The Gemara says that Hani Noshi, the Maikozachia, that the shtar of a woman is the fact that she causes her husband and children to learn Torah, and she shares in that shtar HaTorah completely. It's not a mitzvah that she has because she helps somebody. She is a partner mamish in that Torah. By a woman, it's even stronger, and there it's not necessarily a monetary thing, but the woman creates an environment, a home environment, in order to enable the man to be able to be free to learn Torah. In addition, if she goes out and earns the money, and he doesn't have to depend on a Zevulun, so that's an extra added thing. But even without the monetary point, a woman shares in the Torah learning of her husband and children because she's a causative factor.
Right, and because if it's in a relationship, we would assume that his Torah is her Torah also. That's the the point of being together in a bris, in a covenant between husband and wife. Right.
That's a true partnership.
Right. That's an actual right, and he has a share in what she does too, which not Talmud Torah, but many other important elements. What would you say to many Zvuluns, if we can call them that, many people who are not occupied throughout their days and throughout their weeks in Talmud Torah, often have a dilemma of where to focus their own Torah study. They can only study a short time of the day, dedicate a short time of the day or of the week to limited Torah. So they're relying, let's say, on being a Zvulun to have this, like you said, proliferation of Torah in the world by means of the people who they support. But their own Torah study is often, it can limp a bit because it's, there's only a short time, and the question is how to maximize, how to really make the most of that short time to actualize their own potential for Torah study. What would you advise? How should people focus on the short periods of time that they have each day for learning Torah?
I would say that there are three focuses. One is to learn halacha, because a person has to know the halacha of how to function in this world, so he has to learn the halacha, especially the ones that he's not familiar with. Secondly, somebody I think once came to the Chafetz Chaim and said he only has 20 minutes to learn. What should he learn? The Chafetz Chaim told him, learn Musar. You'll find out you have more than 20 minutes. So Musar is also important. And I would also tell him that if he's capable, to have a time of learning Gemara, because Gemara conditions a person's mind to think Toradic and to think like the Rabbanu Shalom thinks, and in that way he can face all issues in life with a different perspective because his thought process is different. So it's important also for a person to be osek in Torah Shebaal Peh, to learn halacha, and to learn Musar. Anything else that he can learn to get Yedias Torah, whether he's learning Tanakh or he's learning whatever else may be to round out his Yedias Torah is important. But those three things are the main thrust before he branches out to other things.
And when we're speaking about halacha or we're speaking about Gemara, I assume that he should really choose within those realms a method of learning or an area of learning that really appeals to him, that he'll be able to enjoy, that he'll be able to identify with. It
has to speak to him. It has to be something that is on the wavelength of his neshama. And he has to find someone, a Shia or whatever, that he feels comfortable with, that he's going to maximize his results.
Rabbi Leff, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you, as we come to Shavuos, is there anything that would you like to share with our many listeners concerning Yom Kabbalas HaTorah? Whether for the Zvulun or for the Yissachars, anything that with which we can conclude toward Shavuos.
Yeah, I think that the Rav Shach Zatzal used to say that Shavuos is the Rosh Hashanah of Torah, and as much as a person on Shavuos appreciates Zman Matan Torah Seinu, it's not just that we were Mechaber the Torah, but we understood that Torah is a matana. And the more you appreciate that, and the more you understand that the Torah is a tremendous schus and a tremendous opportunity, and you put in, just like on Rosh Hashanah, we create the seeds for the entire year, on Shavuos we create the seeds of Limud Torah for the entire year. A person should not waste his time on Shavuos, but focus on a re-Kabbalah Torah, a personal Kabbalah Torah, a personal appreciation of Torah, and in that way benefit from that appreciation and that Kabbalah for the entire year.
Wonderful. Halavai, we should be Zeicha. Rishon lePeiros ha'Ilon, right? The Ilon is the Adam et Asad, and these are our Peiros, the fruit of the Gemara in says Peiros is our mitzvahs, the Peiros of the Torah. Rabbi Leff, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate all of this. And we should all be zeicher to our own Kabbalah Torah and to share many conversations of Torah again in the future. Thank you very, very much.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kultus. So we're honored to have today with us Jake Turx. Jake Turx is a well-known persona in the field of journalism and in the public space in the United States today, certainly in the Jewish sense. He's a senior White House correspondent for Army magazine, and he's somebody who's perhaps through other jobs, but certainly through this job, has gotten into certainly many interesting and quite unique experiences and conversations in the United States. So, Jake, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Absolutely.
And if I can start with a general question, we're discussing the general idea of anti-Semitism today, and many believe, many consider the expression, the manifestation of anti-Semitism today, whether it's in the United States and even more so perhaps in Europe, but let's stick to the United States, as being a very new phenomenon, as being something that we haven't really experienced before. It's different. It's not the kind of right-wing fascist or the kind of anti-Semitism that we've seen before. It's coming from a different angle and from a different place. From your experience, would you categorize it this way? Certainly we've seen more anti-Semitic incidents of late than we're used to. Where's this coming from?
I'm not sure what the bar that we're used to is, because I think there's still people in our midst who remember far greater surges of anti-Semitism in many different parts of the world. So I'm not sure. I know the statistics. The last 10 years, more and more anti-Semitic incidences are reported every year, but is that necessarily an indication that things are worse than they've ever been? I don't think anybody in Tsarist Russia would agree. I don't think anybody in Nazi Germany would agree. I don't think anyone in America in the early 1900s would agree. So it's better. It's better documented.
These are all distant places or distant times. You know, and we remember, what we remember is the last few decades. What you're saying is, I think it's
no, it is
distant.
Have
a good historical memory, which is certainly valid. But you know, given the last few decades, how do you categorize what's happening now?
Well, let's put it. Well, let's put it this way: if you look at the full scope of history, and with anti-Semitism being the world's oldest profession, and you look at it as
the world's oldest hatred, for sure.
Right. So if you look at it from a 3,000-year history, or 2,000-year history, or 500-year history, or 100-year history, the last 10 years would be insignificant in any one of those metrics.
Perspectives.
Okay.
Right.
Regardless of how long you lay it out. However, what is unique to the last few decades is that we started documenting it more. I mean, can you imagine 100 years ago someone actually reporting someone spray painting something on a shul? I mean, that would have been laughable. I mean, people were being entire villages were being wiped out, right? Jews were being relocated en masse. Entire villages were uprooted. And a lot of these events were considered just isolated events that happened on a local scale. And, you know, think of the typical Ananatevka kind of setting where people are just kicked out of a town and no one even knows about it. Then it's just like, hey, look, this is what it is. Let's just move somewhere else. And not to minimize what's happening today in any kind of way, but what's been happening is an upsurge in reporting of anti-Semitic instances, and the reason is very clear because there are people who make, who are, for one way or another, involved in this as a. I mean, I don't want to use the wrong word, but just as a topic of interest. There are people who have many different interests in this topic.
Hold on, man. You're saying there's no real upsurge in anti-Semitism. It's really a question of reporting, and this has been around all along, and this hasn't, you know, it's gone on under the radar. When
did swastikas spray painted onto buildings start being considered a hate crime? It is a hate crime. Don't get me wrong, but when you're comparing, like, we're being very selective. If you want to be to make the case that something is worse than it's ever been before, you just have to find a statistic that is worse and just highlight that one statistic. Mm-hmm. So if you say, well, there are 1,000 times more graffiti reported the last decade than all of history combined, that doesn't give you an accurate picture of the anti-Semitism in all of history. It's just an indication that this is what people started focusing on more. So it sort of gives the impression if at any other point genocide of a village would be considered an incident, and now it's someone shouting a racial slur through a car window an incident, and you just say, well, look how many incidents we had then and look at how many we have now. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm saying people need to see the perspective, the bigger picture here.
Okay, I understand. And you know, if I would take, you know, the outtake kind of that I'm hearing from your words is, you know, given the right kind of perspective, we would understand that anti-Semitism exists. It's always existed. It's a kind of default that we shouldn't be surprised, or we shouldn't be, we should take it as a given. And try to of course fight it wherever we can. We should try to but we also have to get used to the idea. This is not something new, and it's something which has been around all along.
Yes, that's one aspect. Another aspect is that anti-Semitism is not a single concept. There are many different forms that anti-Semitism shows up in, and the problem is we like to lump them all in together. And there's certain kinds of anti-Semitisms that might not be as insidious as others. For example, you'll have online trolls or just bored teenagers who they're trying to get a rise out of someone, and they might not be fully aware of how offensive something actually is or the history or backstory to it. They're just trying to be obnoxious and rebellious because that's what teenagers will sometimes do. And if someone looks very overtly Jewish, they might decide, hey, let's yell something about the ovens because we once read something about that somewhere. But they might not necessarily have the same kind of hatred than someone who's advocating for an ethno-state and who believes that Jews should either be forcibly removed from the United States along with all other minorities or be killed. So the problem is we say, oh, you're an anti-Semite just like that guy's an anti-Semite. And we're very quick to apply this label. And what happens is...
The statistics don't tell these stories, and they don't know how to differentiate, to distinguish between the different types of expressions. And then
exactly. So the statistic is going to give equal credibility to a David Duke who actually has a plan about eliminating Jews, let's say, or a Richard Spencer. And I'm oversimplifying by saying a plan to eliminate Jews, but let's just give it at that. Versus someone who was cut off in traffic by someone who looks Jewish. He rolls down his window, he screams out an expletive because he had a really hard day, and otherwise might not be a particularly bad person, but that's reported as one equal incident on the same level as all the others. So now you look at the numbers and say, well, last year was 3,000, and this year it's 3,200. Wow, it went up. But, I mean...
Well, let me ask you from your own experience, meaning, as a correspondent, I'm sure you've traveled around a great deal. What's your general impression? What's your general, sense of things as you, I'm sure, you've been to places that have never known, never seen a real specimen, a real Jewish, a real Jew. How do you get along? What's your own impression?
I can give you as many examples as you have time. I'm going to start with one thing that jumps to mind, which is a story that happened about a half a year ago. I spent a week in Iraq for a documentary I'm working on, and at one event that I was at, someone who felt I looked very Jewish came over to me and said, hey, I have a question to ask. And he seemed to ask it like in all seriousness, because he had never seen a Jew before. This was his first opportunity to ask a Jew a question. He was about 19, 20 years old, studied at a local university, spoke English well enough, and he says, tell me, what is your plan for recarving the Middle East with the approach of the 100-year anniversary of post-World War I? So, it's very obvious
your
that...
Your plan as in what? As in the plan of the Jews?
As in, right. So how do you guys plan to recarve the Middle East? You did it 100 years ago, and now it seems very clear that you're planning to recarve it. He was asking for actual information. Like, he really wanted to understand this. And my first thought was, you know what, this is amusing, because, I would like to understand how this guy views the world. I could have said... I had armed security with me. I could have done 100 things, but
let the security guy deal with him or something.
I could, and security was right there. They were monitoring the situation, and I said, no, it's okay. I'd love to have this conversation, because how often do I have the opportunity to get into the mind of someone who thinks in such a unique way? And he wasn't being hateful. He wasn't being rude. He was very respectfully trying to understand how this might impact his family and his community, and this was his worldview. And we spent about 10 minutes, and he told me about, the New World Order and the Bilderbergs and everything, and I knew all about this already. I didn't say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, what are the Bilderbergs? I basically was able to explain to him why it doesn't make any kind of sense, sociologically, mathematically, if there was a group of people who control the entire world, and there are trillions of dollars at stake, why do you assume it's the kind of thing that one 72-hour meeting would be able to just settle and everyone would get onto the same page? I said, everything we know about human beings, if the two of us go out for dinner, we wouldn't even agree on how to split the check. So how are we agreeing on the entire Middle East and all the natural resources and all the people and everything in it? And we sort of had an intellectual conversation, and after 10 minutes, he went away thinking, you know what? I never thought of this before. Like his reaction. Now, do I think he changed as a person? No, but I don't care. I had fun. And at the end of the day...
That's an unusual level of let's say, prejudice. Or you know, I imagine in the United States you don't generally encounter such levels of ignorance and prejudice against Jews,
no.
Or do you? No.
Well, that story actually jumped out at me as wow, this was definitely an outlier and not usual. But
right.
But here's the thing. Here's the important thing. If I would have told him, "Oh, you're just one of those anti-Semites. Get out of here.
Right.
I'm not dealing with you." Now,
right.
so that guy,
right.
yeah, so that guy would have said, "Oh, okay, so the Jew has something to hide." I asked him a question that he's afraid to answer because he knows that I'm onto him, and then all he needs is the echo chamber, and then other anti-Semites to see him as an ally and to say, "Hey, listen, the Jews don't want to provide answers. We will provide you answers. Why didn't you come over to our camp?" So I think a lot of anti-Semitism could just be you know, if you engage with people a lot of times. They might not have these grand views. They might not really understand the world that well or have any kind of master plan. They're just trying to make sense of the world like everybody else. And they came across things. They had some strong questions. If no one answers their questions, they might feel that there is a conspiracy that's trying to keep answers from them. So in the United States, I'll meet all kinds. I mean, I've come across people who were in the U.S., who asked if I could lift my yarmulke to see if I have horns, and they said, "Well, we don't believe that you do, but we're just curious."
But prove it. We want you to prove it.
No, right? But they're well, where do you think this started from? Why do you think this is even a thing? And then we had this conversation, and then as long as people want recognition, people want acknowledgement, people want to feel loved, and if most of the time you give someone a couple of minutes of your time, they'll feel, if I'm the first Jew they ever met, I might be the only Jew they ever met for a very long time.
Or they'll ever meet.
Or they'll ever meet, right.
Right. Let me ask you something else. I mean, clearly you have, like your Iraq story demonstrated, you have a very typical Jewish appearance, apparently. Does that in a certain way make you feel that you have to represent? Meaning, you know, you got all these places which are not necessarily places where Jews are commonplace, and then you feel, well, I have to be very careful with what I say and which position I take. If I take, you know, if I'm, you know, even in a political sense, if I'm pro-Trump, they'll hate me. If I'm anti-Trump, they'll hate me, and they'll think all the Jews are like this. Do you have this pressure of representing, you know, the Jewish people in these kind of places where you go to?
Well, I think every Jew has that pressure all the time, everywhere, anywhere. But even people who don't look Jewish or might not have Jewish names, but as soon as people find out you're Jewish, they might have certain expectations of you. But specifically Iraq, where you actually have a lot of towns that were under ISIS control. After ISIS left the area, one of the first things that the men in these cities did is shave off their beards, because ISIS had very strict rules about mandating people to grow beards. And so one of the first things is they did that. And a lot of I wasn't trying to look provocatively Jewish, and most people did not recognize me as being Jewish. But a lot of a question I got a couple of times is people were like, "Why does he have a beard? Is he fundamentalist?" And I had that a few times. I actually had someone who asked my interpreter, "What's up with his beard?" And my interpreter asked me, "Well, how do you want to respond?" And I said, "Well, tell him I'm Jewish." And he said, well, he says he's Jewish. And this is actually a politician, an Iraqi member of parliament. And he says, he says because he's Jewish. And this parliamentarian actually gave me a hug and a kiss, like just on instinct. And then he backed away and looked around and a little embarrassed and said, listen, let's please keep this between ourselves because I don't want to get into any kind of trouble. But I thought you were definitely an Islamist, and I'm just so relieved, and I love the Jewish people and whatever.
And you're not a fundamental Islamist. Nice.
Yep.
Going back to the United States, do you feel? Again, I'm just echoing what many people seem to think and say, and would be interesting to get your take on this. Do you feel that, given the kind of polarization that we're experiencing in American politics, with the Trump regime, not necessarily, but certainly that's part of it, does that have an impact on the kind of delicate relationships around Jews, around anti-Semitism, whether it's Democrat or Republican? I don't want to get into the internal political question, but just the atmosphere, just the very state of affairs. Is that having an influence?
It's definitely having an influence, and people on both sides, on however many sides there are of the political spectrum, have figured out how to use anti-Semitism as a buzzword to try to discredit people or to try to use just that concept to a political advantage, and that's just going to keep getting worse and worse the way things are going.
And would you associate anti-Semitism specifically? Some associate anti-Semitism specifically with the radical left, let's say in America, which has a certain a European tinge to it, with a question of Muslim immigration and the question of anti-Israel bias. Would you say that's a significant element within today's anti-Semitism, or it's something which is across the board?
Well, you don't need me to say that. I think this is a topic that's been debated and discussed for the last couple of years.
No, but I'll tell you what I mean, though. What I mean is,
it's not like I'm breaking news over here.
I know, but you mentioned before, which I think is a very valid statement. You mentioned before that there's a kind of default situation of, Esav Sinis, Yaakov. We know that there's residual anti-Semitism everywhere, and it's not something which is specifically, this mindset or that mindset, this political opinion, that political. It's just something that we have to understand is going to be there on some level. And the question, and this perhaps goes back a little bit to the question that we opened with, is there something new in this sense? Is this really something different?
Okay, let me give you one specific example, and I'm going to give you the name of the individual. His name is Lucian Wintrich. Lucian Wintrich is a writer for Gateway Pundit, which is considered a far-right blog, and he is a very colorful, interesting individual. He's a friend and a colleague of mine, and he appeared on a list put out by the ADL together with the likes of Richard Spencer and company.
And Farrakhan and other.
Farrakhan and Linda Sarsour were not on that particular list. That's what I'm about to get at. So the interesting thing about Wintrich is that I haven't seen anything attributed to him that was anti-Semitic in any way. That's A. B, I know him personally. And C, he's actually the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. Now, there were other people on that list who I've known for a couple of years in a professional setting and in a non-professional setting too, who I've been friends with these guys. They have a lot of Jewish friends, and no one's ever suspected them of being anti-Semitic. But all of a sudden, because they are associated with conservative media, they're being added to lists with people who we really should be concerned about, while at the same time, we don't see the ADL or other similar groups putting together lists of leftist anti-Semites that we need to stand up to and be wary of. So I think the general concern is not about right-wing anti-Semitism, because there's a lot of exposure that's been done about that, and a lot of just notoriety that goes with being a right-wing anti-Semite, and we haven't seen anywhere
because of the Nazi association, because of the fascism and so on. Because the left-wing anti-Semitism is newer, you're saying it just gets less attention, or it's something that specifically Jews are somehow self-conscious about, perhaps because they're traditionally democratic, or something like that?
Well, the way it works is someone who's seen as the other is very easily demonized, and they can be demonized in any of many ways. Mm-hmm. They're not. I mean, people are not giving someone outside their bubble a chance to defend themselves, and that's going to be true of any bubble. Somehow it's become that on this matter of anti-Semitism, you're going to see the left having a much stronger voice in combating anti-Semitism on the right. Then you'll see people on the right being able to effectively combat anti-Semitism on the left. And if, let's say, you were to ask, and I know that there have been some liberals that have come out against Linda Sarsour recently, but there's still a lot who would say, hey, I know her. She's not an anti-Semite. She's a friend of mine. And there are others who might look at me and say, hey, how could you say that just because you know Lucian Wintrich, he's not an anti-Semite? So sometimes it's just this bias that people have when they feel comfortable with someone. They want to see the best in those people.
Right, but what you're saying, though, is that this kind of polarization of camps is also affecting our ability. We become more... We dig in deeper in our own camp, and it affects our ability to criticize our own kind of friends and colleagues because of this polarization, because of this kind of each camp has to defend its own, even when there's this real anti-Semitism going on.
And it's only going to keep getting worse and worse. And a lot of times you also have a lot of people who would say, hey, I'm not even going to respond to people attacking me. And then what ends up happening invariably is it only confirms people's suspicions. You see people like Dr. Sebastian Gorka and Steve Bannon, who were like everyone was calling them Nazi for months on end, and they never issued any kind of response. They never tried defending themselves. Gorka did.
Right.
What? I'm sorry?
Silence is also a statement, you're saying.
Right. So now, Gorka actually did come out after a couple of months and he started defending himself, but Bannon never did. And to a lot of people, it doesn't matter how pro-Israel Bannon might be. It doesn't matter how many Jewish friends he might have. It doesn't matter how many Jews worked for him. To paraphrase Ben Shapiro, who's, I'm told, also on the show, you could call Bannon anything you want, but just don't call him an anti-Semite. Like, Ben didn't particularly love Bannon. He worked with him, but he said, look, you can call the guy a lot of things, but he's just not an anti-Semite. So it's not like all these people who were saying, oh, I love him, don't call him. They're like, no, I don't love him, but he's just not. And yet it doesn't matter, because once people started calling him that, it didn't matter if there was anything to back it up with.
Right, the label sticks. Right, the label sticks.
Exactly. So it's something that's just going to keep getting worse as bubble mentality keeps getting worse. So
right. Let me just. I know your time is precious. I'm just going to ask you one more question, and this is kind of a general question about the Jewish approach towards dealing with anti-Semitism. You gave me, I think, an important historical perspective starting out with, and the historical kind of way in which Yidden have dealt with anti-Semitism is basically to kind of keep their heads down. We're in Galus, where, this is not a place for us to start making a fight out of it. Let's keep the head down and things will just go away. That doesn't seem to be the prevalent approach today. Would you say that that's just, things have changed? We're on social media, we're in government, we're everywhere, and therefore we have to fight it vociferously. We have to, make a point. We have to be on the streets. We should demonstrate and so on. or are we still? Do we still have this kind of Golos element in which let's ride the storm? How do we approach this?
So I'll tell you this: I'm not familiar with any ubiquitous Jewish approach to anything. Everything has multiple approaches. Everyone has their own Torah. Not to be dismissive of the concept of Torah, but to say that there are different Gedolim with different approaches. There are also different schools of thought, and people have different things, and everyone thinks that what they're doing is based on things that have been successful in the past. But
how do you see it from your experience?
Here's very simple. Here's from my experience, and I think it's going to sum up everything I said in the entire interview.
Okay.
The only thing as dangerous as anti-Semitism is when someone who's philo-Semitic is disparaged as an anti-Semite without any justifiable cause. And that is the worst, saddest possible thing, to take someone who's never done or said anything against Jews, or perhaps may have said something without being aware. Like, you know what? Right now, the big story is anyone who criticizes George Soros is an anti-Semite because Soros is a dog whistle. Well, what if someone...
I saw you tweeted something on that today.
Yeah. But look, what if someone never got the memo that Soros is representative of all of Judaism, and they really just don't like something that Soros did, something in particular, and they say something against Soros, all of a sudden now they're an anti-Semite, and they had no idea how it even came about, because well, I don't think Soros should be investing his money in Bitcoin. Oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're against Soros. And it's like, wait a second, you got to, but that's it. Now they got the label. They can't. So to take someone who either is not an anti-Semite, worst case is actually a friend of the Jewish people, which has happened in many cases, or someone who just said something innocent without understanding the full gravity of the political atmosphere around that particular term at that particular time, and to lump them in with real anti-Semites is devastating. All the more so when people do it deliberately for political advantage.
Right. So on the one hand, what you're saying is it's just important to clarify, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. We need a moral compass. The kind of moral, there's a certain moral befuddlement. Everything is mixed up, and then everyone becomes anti-Semitic, and nobody understands the gravity of the accusation because it's just being flung around everywhere. So that's first of all, to understand, that there is such a thing, but we have to be careful about who we apply it to and how we use it. But the second thing that is saying is also, words need to be fought with words. Silence is not a weapon. Is not an option here. If there are words going around, then we have to make the statements make the true statements and make the relevant statements that need to be heard. This is what I'm understanding from what you're saying also.
Yeah, it's not just for yourself. You have responsibility to your family. If someone is falsely accusing you of one of the most vile possible things in the world, for you to just sit back and allow this to cast a dark shadow over your family, over your friends, over people who associate with you is just irresponsible. You have to defend yourself unless you feel that you carry it as a badge of honor. There's some people who say, hey, I am an anti-Semite and I love the title and keep screaming anti-Semite because that only gives me a bigger platform. Look at Richard Spencer. By the way, Richard Spencer is almost entirely a media creation. Not that the media was looking to deliberately do this, but he was great for ratings. People were rightfully frightened of him, but he never had a big following. I was at his rally in Gainesville, Florida. They closed down, if I remember correctly, 5 square miles. They brought in the National Guard. They had hundreds of armed troops all around the campus, and there were only 27 Spencer supporters in an auditorium that could hold 700. 27 were Spencer supporters. The rest were college students who were there to protest, media, and just a couple of curious people who just wandered in to see what's going on. And this is what the media was busy with for a few weeks straight. A guy who had 27 supporters. You understand what I'm saying?
Right, but from going back to your Iraq story, what we learned from there is that there's also hope, meaning we can also educate people, we can also speak to people, we can engage them, we can hold conversation. Opinions are not necessarily, well-based or founded or educated. They're just there because sometimes they spring out of nowhere, and it's important to engage people and to try to do whatever we can in order to dismiss and dispel the myths and the misunderstandings and so on.
So you obviously don't engage people unless you're knowledgeable about their conspiracies and their worldview. And the reason, and not to further perpetuate any misunderstandings here, don't assume you can ever win an argument or ever win anybody over to your side. That's not what the focus should be. The focus should be everybody wants to be loved. If this guy never got love at home and he ended up gravitating towards haters, if you give him a little bit of attention, a little bit of love, I mean, you see how easy it is for someone who's cut off in traffic by someone who looks Jewish to start screaming out racially charged anti-Semitic language without necessarily having any kind of record of hating Jews. The flip side is just as true. If just you show someone patience and understanding, and you actually know what they're talking about, you actually could have a conversation where you're not trying to necessarily persuade him, you're just trying to have an intellectual conversation. It is most likely not going to change his mind on an intellectual level. They'll still believe in their conspiracy theories because you can't really disprove a negative. But
there are some, unfortunately, there are some prominent Jews out there that didn't give us the greatest name in the world. But that doesn't make a conspiracy theory. That just makes one bad Jew.
And you know what? At least they can at least let the guy go away from the conversation confused, thinking, you know what? I thought all Jews were bad, and now I just met one Jew and he wasn't bad, so I'm not exactly sure how that makes sense with my worldview. And a lot of times I'll get people who will say something to the effect of, "Oh, you don't know what they're really doing because they don't invite you to their meetings. Like they don't include you in on." And I'll say something to the effect of, either I'll say, "Hey, I'm the guy running media, so the guys who are running the banks and running the world governments, they should be cooperating with me if they want this world domination to work out." And sometimes, a funny, sarcastic remark, I'll be like, "Excuse me, I haven't missed an Elders of Zion meeting in the last 7 years." And sometimes
it sounds like you've done this many times, from the. You say this with it sounds so convincing, it sounds like you've used this line a few times.
And I've had a lot of fun doing it every time, I'll tell you that.
Nice, very good. Thank you very, very much.
It was a lot of fun. This is, you really got me fired up over here.
Well, we try our best, especially when we have such colorful guests on the show. And carry on doing your wonderful work and being such a wonderful representative. And Mir Hashem should be Makana Shem Shemaim and everywhere you go. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Let's do this again sometime.
Call to all the best.
Bye-bye.
Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
Yeah, the answer to the first riddle is that the violence of the Korban is the husband owns the Korban. The Tzedaka called Masha comes to Yisschar on a bailo, even if she would have money, the Masha belongs to him. But the husband brings the Korban for the Isha. So she's not the bailo, Magam that she's bringing it, but the violence of the Korban belongs to the husband, the Choya. So he would have to have the Moshav Matisyahu. Her Moshav Matisyahu wouldn't help. The answer to the second riddle is that the Ramban says that it's Mishpatei HaTorah. Torah is a mishpat between the Baal and the wife. Aside from the fact that the Charlotte is the Vehete, she muteres loy, but it's about the issue. It's also negate to the Ksuba. Whereas Nigei Batim is a nest, but it's not a mishpat. The Chiddush of Ramban is that there's no place where you have a mishpat between two people where the husband time is one thing and the wife time is something else. V'chulu, that's a mishpat there that you have a nest that determines it. Every other place is given over to the Columnist in Choshen Mishpat in Even Ezer, according to the Tainas, according to the Rayas. Here you have a net that's poising. Nigay Batim has nothing to do with the mitzvah. Anyhow, call to Zagizim.